Okay.
Ben, did you call him on the phone?
And you are
Oh, I
live.
sent him a text, which really is effective for him. I try calling him too.
Can't hurt.
Okay, you are live.
Good morning. We're live.
Yes, you are.
Okay, good morning. We have not started the meeting yet. We're waiting for a few other regions to join.
Pam Coleman, did you hear from Regent Santiago?
Yes, he confirmed that he was attending the meeting. I just emailed him.
Okay, super. Thank you.
I supply the chairman with the link again. And he's trying.
Yeah, I hope I didn't go to spam because I did that at the outset. Or maybe I need to just double check on the relationship. Maybe I'm blocked. No, I'm just kidding.
I mentioned that you had sent it. I sent it again just in case.
No, third time's the charm. It's great. Yeah.
Well, so far it's not the charm.
At least he acknowledged.
Perhaps the fourth time will be a charm. Hmm.
David, what's the read these days? Oh, there's Rich. What's the read on full professorship and how long students wait these days
Great,
for
thanks.
professors to come in? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
On a class,
Yeah.
I wait I'm there 10 minutes early, and I wait 5 minutes for the students. I begin a class usually 5 minutes late.
You're a good soul. Good soul.
Because in a class of 32 or 35 students, you have, some people, similar problems as individuals are having here, getting online.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay, looks like Rich is having bandwidth problems.
Can you hear me though?
Oh, we can hear you perfectly.
Well, nobody needs to see my face.
I would like to.
I can't figure out where that goes. Connect to video. So I'm afraid to touch any of this now, that I at least can hear people.
You have a quorum, though.
All right. I am sorry for this. I apologize. Normally it comes in. I tried this about 10 of. I was going to be early, and nothing occurred. So anyway, good to see everybody. Felice, and everybody there with Joanne. How are you all? David, good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich. Nice to see you.
Nice to be seen.
I empathize with your technology issues. I have them quite often also.
Let me just start by calling the meeting to order. Will you do a roll call, Pam?
Yes, good morning. Roll call, Richard Balducci,
Here.
David Blitz,
Here.
Felice Gray Kemp,
Here.
David Jimenez, Joanne Ryan,
Here,
and Ari Santiago. Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you for that. I get the first order of business would be approval of the previous Finance Committee meetings for March 10th. Is there a motion?
so move.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Felice, for the second. All those in favor, any corrections or comments about them? If not, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion's carried. We have before us today a rather easy agenda, which is unusual for us. We have 3 information items and 2 action items. The first action item uses the use of higher education emergency relief funds, the HERF dollars. And I'm going to go to Ben to go through that because even when I look at it and go over it, I thought I understand it. And then I turn around and find out there's money going in different directions and et cetera. So why don't I turn that over to you, Ben, and you give us some background because you seem to be the one that has the best grasp on it. And I understand why, because of your background.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. Good morning, everybody. I have decided that I should share regularly with you the progress on the use of HERE funds for 2 reasons. One, it is a dynamic environment with federal rules coming out from time to time. We are still actually awaiting they have not yet announced the formal distribution of the ARPA, the 3rd round of stimulus funds has not been, other than the bill's passed, it is the law, but they have not yet run the distribution formula and notified through their normal system each institution of their amount. We have estimates that we're relying on for planning purposes, but we have not received a formal notification. The scuttlebutt in the industry is that the Department of Education is holding that, while they had originally said they would announce the distribution in April, that they are deferring that while they conclude a new round of guidance about how, new rules for some of the areas which are a little ill-defined right now. So I anticipate a new, I'm sure it'll come on a Friday afternoon because these things always seem to come out on Friday afternoons. A new announcement of the specific dollar amounts for the 3rd round, as well as guidance on a whole number of areas. But the lack of guidance is not holding us back. And there is some guidance out there, and we are proceeding to utilize those funds and to make plans for utilization of those funds over the coming years. Some of the items that we want to that we need to do around student financial assistance and around institutional aid are sort of long lead items or items, and we have some process that's going on internally that I want to talk about today. So I provided a table that summarizes where we are across CSCU with the distribution of, the use of funds that are available or likely will be available to each component of the institution. Recall that these are awarded to individually accredited institutions. So all 12 community colleges get their own numbers. For the purposes of presentation, I've rolled those up into a single column for the community colleges, and the universities I've identified separately. Charter Oak also. Charter Oak got a little bit of student financial assistance, but has not received any institutional aid because as an online institution, they're not eligible for that under the laws that have been passed. So I'm going to start with the universities first. Universities have indicated that they have given away student financial assistance both in fiscal 20 and 21. So that was March of 20 or April of 20 when the first CARES Act came out, and then we did another round in the spring of 2021. So for the students enrolled this semester, they received payments. So far, the student financial assistance has come in the form of essentially check writing. Well, some of it's direct deposit, but we're giving money directly to students. It ends up going through their student account, but that's simply a matter of convenience. It doesn't, when we put it in their account, we do it in a way that it doesn't offset any money they might owe us, but we do it there so that we can take advantage of the direct deposit information we have available for many of our students. And it's as a practical measure. The federal guidance does allow that. It does not allow us to simply place it in their account and have it as though it were a payment that would allow them to receive a refund if there was surplus, but would also pay off any outstanding balance. We cannot require that students use these funds to pay off outstanding balances. Although we're thinking about how to work within those rules to use this in a more traditional financial aid manner where we package it and apply it against tuition fees and cost of attendance. But we're still working on how to do that. And we're hopeful, frankly, that the next round of guidance will include that, because many institutions around the country have voiced the concern that simply sending out money is not as effective and not as helpful to students, we don't think, as it would be to award it in a way that was, coordinated with all the other financial assistance that's available to those students. So that's where we are, but you can see the amounts in each of the two rounds universities have paid out on page 5 of the agenda packet.
Excuse me, Ben, could you share that for our YouTube viewers as well?
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, great point. Thank you.
Let me just remove some of the clutter from my screen so that they don't have to look at my Outlook reminders. Oops, that's not it, is it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, you are seeing a green and white spreadsheet on your screen? Great. So if you look in the columns for the 4 universities, you can see that they've provided grants in varying amounts based on their size of their student bodies. But at Central, it was 3.7 and 4.6 million, and sort of roughly corresponding numbers in the other for the other 4 universities. We also have identified housing refunds that were given out in the 2 fiscal years. So most of it was in fiscal 20, and then some was in fiscal 21. I would remind you that in the fiscal 20 housing refunds, those only amounted to about half. The total amount of the refunds was in excess of $20 million. And you can see that round was about 11 million. The remainder of those housing refunds was offset by payments from the state's coronavirus relief fund, also federal money, but from a different source of federal funds passed through the state. And then in 21, there's been some refunds that were awarded to students. And then they have not applied any COVID expenses, although there were a few in the community colleges last year. And then the large category there is lost revenue for fiscal 20 and 21. And this is a projection. Some of it we've already claimed in both the colleges and the universities, but some of it is awaiting the conclusion of the spring semester so that we can, the rules say that we accrue or we incur the cost of lost revenue at the end of the period in which that revenue would normally have been expected. So at the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate, the universities anticipate drawing down the 70, well, it's not quite 75, it's the 10.4 million at Central, almost 5 Eastern, 11 million at Southern, and 11 million at Western. The universities have been working with each other to ensure that they are using a uniform or comparable method of estimating revenue losses. And these are preliminary. They've not yet submitted these lost revenue numbers, and they could change a little bit as they get to the end of the year. But at this point, we have a very solid information about our revenues for the second half of fiscal 21. The one thing I would note about that is that if you look, the Central, Eastern, and Southern remain with some, if you compare the top number for total funding and the total at the bottom of the first green bar, you can see here that there is funding remaining at Central, Eastern, and Southern, but Western anticipates drawing down all of their institutional funds for lost revenue. And I think the reason that it's different in the case of Western is twofold. One, the formula for distributing the funds is less generous at Western compared to the size of their student body than it is at some of the other institutions. There's based on the formula factors around Pell participation in student enrollment, and also they've suffered greater losses in fiscal 21. So you can see that that brings us up to where we are now. And then the universities indicated to me when I collected this from them this last week that they show their remaining amount for student financial assistance there. It's about 12 or 13 million for the two larger institutions and a little over 6 million with the two smaller. And then you can see that they have 13 million at Central, 6 million at Eastern, almost 10 million at Southern available for offsetting lost revenue in the coming 2 years. So those funds are available through fiscal 23. Actually, I think through fiscal 23 and even into the beginning of fiscal 24. So they could even claim that lost revenue for the summer term in 2024. So that's where we are. I mean, that's encouraging. I'm a little, I wish Western had a larger grant and was able to sock away some money to cover for revenue losses in the future. But I'm very pleased that they're able to fully offset their revenue losses, or almost fully offset their revenue losses in the current year. And I'm obviously encouraged that there are some. I expect when we present budgets that I've encouraged the campuses at the universities and the colleges to be somewhat optimistic about the revenue recovery and their enrollment recovery, and with the understanding that if they fall short of those expectations, we do have this lost revenue available to them to make up the difference. One of my concerns is that if we should try to budget programs and offerings at all of our institutions in the coming year that will support a robust enrollment recovery. And we can make adjustments if that does not occur, and we have these resources to backfill. So that's sort of where we are in the universities. The colleges have a slightly more complicated picture, and I will turn to those now. In the colleges, they've given out $14.25 million twice. That was the total amount. We kind of had a formula that divided that out by campus. This 21 was more needs-based than it was in 20. I think I've reported on that to you before, but we've given out, like I said, almost $8.5 million out of a total of $6 million available for student financial aid. So there is $57 million available for the next 2 years. It's worth noting that currently the community colleges as a whole, spend about just under $20 million for the combination of institutional aid and waivers. So an additional 57 million over 2 years will more than double the aggregate amount of student financial assistance available to community college students over the next 2 years. Depending on, it could shift it between the years, but overall it will more than double. It will normally be about $40 million, and now it will be about $100 million in student financial assistance over the next 2 years. They have also they charged some expenses to COVID. Those had already been drawn down, so it's kind of a negligible amount of money overall. In addition, we're estimating about $38 million in lost revenue for the current year, and a little bit from the spring of 2020. That $38 million includes an estimate for an effort that we are developing right now, which will be to use one of the types of lost revenue that we are allowed to claim for under the rules that have been promulgated is to deal with delinquent student accounts. We have a very significant number of delinquent accounts from our students at the colleges. The account aging report from a few weeks ago that we produced internally shows that we had $20 million in receivables from the current semester. Normally, that number during the semester might be as high as 8 or 9 or 10 million, and then diminish down to, by the time you get to 4 or 5 months later, it's usually at about $3 or $4 million that sort of gets paid over a longer period of time. By comparison, our receivable number for the fall of 20, so the last semester, and several months, 5 or 6 months ago, the semester ended, we have about $10 million. I'm sorry, $6 million in receivables from last year, which is, again, about twice as high as you would normally see it being. This is a reflection of the fact that, well, certainly the pandemic has harmed the finances of students, but we also have been more tolerant of late payments. So we had put in emergency measures during the pandemic where we extended payment plans to extend beyond the end of the semester for which the tuition fees were owed. We have suspended some of our collection efforts because we thought, sending collection agents after students during the pandemic was not in accordance with our desire to remove barriers to education for our students. And so we've made some moves which were student friendly, but have also diminished our collections in the current environment. I think was the right decision. However, it does create a concern for us. When we have student debt and student receivables, our practice, which we think is appropriate, and I will continue this practice, is that we, at the end of each year, we apply an allowance for doubtful accounts to all of our student receivables. And so we essentially diminish student receivables are an asset of ours, and we reduce the value of that asset, which affects our operating results, by the amount of all student receivables that are more than 1 year old on June 30th. So we basically, if we don't collect it within a year, our experience shows that our collections are extremely low and fall off very quickly. And so we write that off. That means that if the $6 million, which students, the stuff before the $6 million, the $6 million from the fall, and the whatever it ends up being on June 30th, the $10 or $20 million from this spring will remain as a receivable on our books until a year from this June 30th. But there's also a fair amount that from the prior year that was not paid off as much as we normally would have seen as a result of the pandemic. And those numbers are relatively high. So if we don't address this, we will take about a a $5 to $6 million hit to our operating results this June 30th which is about twice as large as normal. And we will take a similar hit or maybe much larger hit a year from this June 30th as the bulk of the unpaid bills from the pandemic get to 1 year old. So we are taking an approach to address that as a major revenue loss for us in two tranches. One now to deal with the more than a year old receivables, and then once the next fiscal year begins, we can address the pandemic receivables from fiscal 21. We're developing a plan to do that using using a portion of that lost revenue that's in the top green box, as well as for the second round that we would do next year, it would be lost revenue in fiscal 22, and that's part of the 33 million you see for the community colleges. In addition, there's another component of lost revenue is the lost revenue due to the drop in enrollment. So we're able to we've developed a method we think will comply with the federal rules for calculating what those are. We're using the method of comparing to fiscal 19, which is a sort of the last fully unimpacted by the pandemic year that we have. That is apparently a reasonable approach that was identified as one of the allowable approaches by the U.S. Department of Education. In addition to that, lost revenue, we are looking at, there's a line here that says system and campus initiatives for $41 million. That is a combination of money that would be directed by individual campuses to meet specific items that are issues for them related to support students in the recovery from the pandemic or otherwise related to the pandemic. We also have set up a process within the system right now, ongoing, in which we set up committees based on input from the college community about areas of potential intervention. So they included things like professional development and mental health. One was working on the accounts receivable question, working on enrollment management and our banner program, information technology. There are a couple of others. Those committees were sort of set up. They were open, so anybody in the college community who had an interest could be directed to those committees by the campus leadership. And they met and developed proposals. Those proposals are now being reviewed by a committee made up of the three regional presidents, Dr. Steinmetz, Coley, and Lambella, as well as Dr. Levinson, the president of the Connecticut State Community College. So those individuals with some have been going through and prioritizing all of those campus and system initiatives. They are also, I've asked them to review these other, the other uses of funds, like there's a $10 million contingency line there, which I asked for there to be some contingency in the event that we end up, the rules change or other things develop over the next few years. I didn't want to fully deplete all of our funds at this stage, thinking that we might, we could always revisit how to best spend that $10 million in contingency before the funds expire. So they are reviewing all of that, including a whole host of initiatives. They received about $60 million worth of proposals, the largest of which was using these funds to expedite the expansion of guided pathways. But there are also significant IT requests and some other areas as well. So they are looking through that now and are anticipated to provide a recommendation to Dr. Gates on May 18th. So in just under 2 weeks, they will have concluded that process. They are working with campus presidents and others. It's a very collaborative process, and they will make recommendations to Dr. Gates that we will go forward with at that point. But I wanted to put it out there that this money is going to be covering a variety of items: lost revenue, student financial assistance, and these other initiatives, which are quite varied. And I will certainly provide the board with what those initiatives are as we once they've made their recommendations to Dr. Gates. We have not yet begun a process. Actually, I've just been having some preliminary discussions with my colleagues on staff to try to develop a similar approach for the student financial assistance. We would like to try to develop a method, as I said, for complying with the rules around that prevent us from directly using those funds to offset student accounts, which makes it very difficult for us to award it to students as part of their financial aid package. But I think there is a way to do that, and some colleges and universities have begun to roll out, a system whereby students have to consent to this program. So we're gonna try to model ours on the best of those, and hopefully get some additional guidance in the next month or so from the federal government, so that we can do that. So that's a big area of how to best manage the large increase in student financial assistance. But we seem to have a process in place that will allocate the institutional funds amongst the various proposed initiatives, and I think we'll end up with a package of spending that is very helpful to our students in their efforts to come back to school and be successful post-pandemic. Are there any questions about that's my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions from members of the committee? David?
Yeah, Ben, I had a question about the line system and campus initiatives for the community colleges, which is the largest line there, the $41 million line that you were just talking about.
Yes.
And in particular, the question of the guided pathways, because you may recall the discussion we had with you some weeks ago, and I can't remember whether that was a faculty advisory committee meeting or some ad hoc meeting that we were having, but you were indicating that you thought that the proposal might be somewhere in the $30 to $35 million range for full funding of guided pathways. So my question, which will have a follow-up, is that still, out there as the thinking on the matter, that the bulk of that money would go to fully implement guided pathways before the pilots had been done at the 3 community colleges where they're being established?
I think the conversations that I've had with the the regional presidents who are doing this is that it was clear that that because this one proposal was so large, it would potentially crowd out some of the other items. I also have a little bit of concern, which I shared with them, and I think they share, that if we the $35 million, assuming that that's over 2 years, that leaves us with kind of a big cliff at the end that we would then have to absorb, whatever it is, $20 million a year of expenses into our community college budget in 1 year, which is a little bit challenging. And also, I don't, there's a lot of uncertainty about how quickly we can get this rolled out for a number of reasons. There are collective bargaining issues that need to be addressed, and collective bargaining personnel issues. Who's going to do the job? Who gets hired? How are those positions being treated within our system? There are also some very bedeviling space allocation concerns that we need to have. A guided pathways program requires some on-campus space. It needs to be relatively high profile. The process of advisement requires a level of confidentiality and privacy that requires us to have some offices or conference rooms. And so we are now working individually at each campus to identify, what those, what the rollout looks like, both from a human resources and management perspective, as well as the physical implementation. At the same time, obviously, they're working to develop the program. I mean, Guided Pathways involve a whole series of what is it? It's a suite of initiatives that will help students. So there are a number of efforts going on. I think that I indicated to the leaders of the committee making these decisions that while I would love to fund the entirety of that, I also would love to fund some of these other great ideas that have come out of the campuses. And so they should dedicate as much money to the Guided Pathways from this here source as they think makes sense. And that we will work to fill in the gaps with a combination of operating funds through the budget, or there are some additional funds that have been indicated that the state may be willing to put in from the relatively large amount of stimulus funds that it is in possession of. Both the governor's, well, not his budget proposal, but subsequent to the governor's budget proposal, he put out a proposed distribution of coronavirus relief funds, or it might have been a different, one of their large categories of state, of federal assistance. They indicated that they would be willing to give us funds for Guided Pathways. That's not a done deal, but they are strongly considering using some of the statewide stimulus funds for Guided Pathways. So we are, I've told them to say what they think that makes sense to do for Guided Pathways, and that we will work to fill in the rest. I would ideally like to have the budgetary contribution to Guided Pathways, from whatever it is, 0 today to 20 million dollars over a couple of years. That I think that would be much more manageable for the system to absorb that cost into our budget over several years, as we presumably see enrollment benefits from the program. So I don't think that it's going to end up being $35 million. I think that they are going to put as much in as they think they can spare, looking at the totality of their proposals that they have before them.
Okay, I don't want to belabor the point, but my concern is that we don't know the effectiveness of the advising system that's being considered, the holistic case management. And my understanding was there were going to be 3 pilot projects, which would give some actual data. Paying for it, from what I've seen in one of the charts that was presented to us, is based on projections of increased retention and greater number of credits per student per year, which are just that, projections, not based on any data. And so I agree with you that, there is a cliff after 2 years if you go ahead and hire something like 200 advisors, and then find out that 1, it's not as effective as claimed, and 2, there's not the money available to continue paying them. That seems to be a significant problem.
Well, I certainly understand that, your concern. I have more confidence in the national literature on the effectiveness and utility of the advisement and Guided Pathways suite of programs than you do, perhaps, but that's fair enough. I understand that there's not sufficient evidence to draw conclusions about the financial effectiveness of it, and each system is different, and so there is some uncertainty. I certainly acknowledge that. So I that's exactly I share your concern, and I think that we're trying to find a way to mitigate that so that there is less of a cliff, and so that we are giving the program an appropriate amount of time to develop what we hope to be its outcomes. The one thing that is not reasonable is to expect that if we make a decision to be advisors today to go beyond those 3 institutions, that we would see a noticeable impact on enrollment right away. I don't think that's likely to happen. Although there are some other things, we are doing a lot of other things that are very positive for enrollment, I hope. I don't know that Guided Pathways produces the results until it's been in effect for a couple of years. So we're trying to make a proposal to do that. I will tell you that so far, because the way we develop our budget each year, we start with the budget at the system office and the one college. That includes our current proposal does include funding for the 3 pilots. Those are being funded out of operating funds for the for the colleges, or at least that's our initial thinking. So those pilots are moving forward, or at least will be in the budget that is proposed to the board next month. So I appreciate your concern, and I actually think that your concern is one of the best ways to address that is to not fully fund these funds, but use these funds to allow us to go a little bit faster, but maybe not to, make the assumption that we'll fully staff up. As a practical matter, hiring the number of advisors and training them and implementing the systems necessary to make guided pathways work is going to be a time-consuming activity. Finding the right people, training them, putting the systems in place, all are if we break into a sprint, I don't think we will have it fully implemented for the fall, but will be fully implemented over the course of the coming academic year.
Thanks for that, Ben. And just another comment. I think, you always try to hedge your bet, so to speak, and we're looking for increased numbers of students at our community colleges and universities. I think Biden has been talking about free community college now and moving that forward. And I think that's going to become part of the rhetoric that people are going to be talking about, which hopefully will help stimulate our community colleges. We have the PAC dollars, PAC program, and the Guided Pathways program, which I think will help us more than probably other states as far as free community college. I think we're ahead of that particular curve. We're looking at, and I appreciate Ben's comments and wanting to be somewhat cautious with dollars, because those HERF dollars and those stimulus dollars, they're going to end at some point. And then, the rubber is going to meet the road as to how we're going to project and pay for programs as we move forward. So I think what you commented on, Ben, is well done and well said. I think where we're headed with the PAC programs, our community college free and guided pathways, and our free community college program, which is already in step along with Rhode Island, I guess, in Massachusetts. We're ahead of the curve, and hopefully the news that's out there will bring incentives to others to come back and get involved with Connecticut, particularly because I think ours are better than some of the other programs that are or will be offered in the near future. Other comments for Ben? Who could use a rest at the moment? If not, thank you very much for that, Ben, inclusive of all that information. I appreciate it. I know the members do also. The next information item deals with shared service budget presentation changes. And that one, Ben, if you would like to just step into that, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, the reason I'm presenting this is because we are envisioning some significant budget format changes the budget that we present to you next month, and rather than overwhelming everybody with not only the format changes but also the substance of the numbers and the consequences for our organization, I thought it was best to preview some of the ways that we are organizing the budget for the coming year amongst the community colleges. We're not making any material changes at the universities, or they're none planned, although I suppose we could have a whole month. So, but the presentation changes are around the shared services and some of which are things that we've been doing for a long time through the system office, and some of which are newly constituted as shared services rather than campus provided services. So there are a couple of different categories. First of all, there are the shared services that have been established that we envision becoming a permanent fixture, or at least a longstanding fixture of the budget for the CSCU. So these include the finance shared services, payroll, purchasing, as well as the accounting, as well as the human resources and information technology. Now, these are services that, well, like in the case of information technology and accounting, we've been providing a shared service basically through the construct of the system office for a long time. So we have, 50 or so IT professionals and I don't know, a group of 20 or so people in the accounting and division who serve the colleges and universities and do various tasks for them. The tasks that we do for the universities is more limited. In the IT, it's infrastructure, coordination, in accounting, it's financial reporting and debt management. And then for the colleges, it's more all-inclusive. So there are those existing shared services. We've added in payroll, human resources, and purchasing over the last year or so. And those include components that were previously at the system office, as well as staff who have been transferred into the shared service from their campus. So those are two categories, and then there's a third group of shared services, which I'll refer to as EMSA, which is Enrollment Management and Student Affairs, which is newly constituted within the one college, and it is envisioned that the shared services model is a transitional step as part of the merger of the community colleges. So it is expected that as when we become a single operating college in 2023, that the what is currently being treated as a shared service will simply become a division of the college, will become a service provided by the college. There's no expectation that those would be expanded to the universities or Charter Oak or anything like that. If you look at I provided a draft of a table that provides some information about, answer some questions about those services. I thought that was helpful because it provided a little bit more specific questions about how these have been established and what our thinking is there. I wanted to provide that. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm not going to go into detail. I've also provided you with the allocation that was provided to the community colleges as part of their budget instructions in late April. And what it does is it takes the amount of, so far, the way we're managing it is we are going to allocate the costs of staff who perform these. These are very labor intensive. There's very little non-staff costs in these because we are trying to work our way through the integration of this with our very complicated system of fringe benefit maximization. We elected this year to allocate the personnel costs and the other costs, the OE costs. So, for instance, the amount we spend on Grant Thornton to do our audit report. That's an example. And there's a fair amount in IT. There's about $15 million in IT. Those costs are not being allocated through this model, but are instead being allocated through the normal distribution of state grants. So that money is taken off the top and is essentially paid for by the colleges on based on the number of full-time equivalent students they have over the last 3 years, which is the basic logic of our distribution model. So what we've done is there are a couple of different allocation methods that we're envisioning. There's one which is for full-time equivalent students last fall. That is going to be used for purchasing and for accounting and for information technology. That includes well, that does not include Charter Oak State College. Some of the others do, so I make that point. The second allocation method is employee headcount, and we are using that for allocating costs for human resources and payroll. And those are shared services are being Charter Oak State College is participating in those. So the denominator is a little different because we're including Charter Oak's employees in making that allocation. For there are other allocations shown there that impact EMSA and the EMSA guided pathways. The EMSA guided pathways is the pilot program at the three schools. And so we're allocating the cost to those schools. So it's a limited allocation, it only allocates to Housatonic, Middlesex, and Northwest, which is the first three schools where guided pathways will begin in the fall. And those are the existing employees from those schools. So they're basically being, and we've held them harmless. So essentially, the college is paying the same cost that they previously paid for those staff members who are going to be providing those services, but under a shared service managed through the guided pathway staff at the one college. In addition, there's the broader EMSA distribution. That's a large number. It's $25 million in staff accounting for over 200 employees who are in the areas of registrar, financial aid, admissions, and guided pathways, central guided pathways. Those individuals rolled up their salaries and fringes to that $25 million number and allocating that based on it's based on the number of full-time equivalent students, but it's phased in. So we've looked at how much we've taken, if we've taken a dollar amount of worth of staff we totaled up the value, the cost that the campuses for the staff who've been moved over into the shared service. And we started with that. And then we used the full-time FTE student numbers to address the difference because the program is somewhat larger. So we did that to minimize the budgetary disruption at each campus as a result of this. So those charges then, rather than being taken off the top in the distribution model, will instead be charged to the campuses in their budget. So to pick an example, as Nuntuck will include $1.9 million in their budget to pay for this group of services. It will include, $150,000 for purchasing and $50,000 for accounting. And you could look at the spreadsheet and know what the dollar amounts that they are paying for each of those services is. I will tell you that it is absolutely my hope that these services will come down in cost. We have generally taken all the staff who are involved in those services and brought them into the shared service. And those tend to reduce through attrition that we, in some cases, don't think we necessarily, there is an expectation that these shared services will be less costly than the services as they previously had been arranged. But because we are currently in a no layoff environment, at least for the next month or 2 months, we have not proposed any changes to those staffing levels as part of these transitions, these areas. So I expect to see those the cost of those services come down over the next year or two as we are able to capitalize on attrition to put those at the right size. We also, these are newly provided services. HR is a little bit more mature in payroll, and accounting certainly. But some of these are relatively, these are brand new in the shared service environment. So we expect improvements in the value of those services over the coming years. So that's the change that we're going to include. It has, even though they're being expected to pay these shared service allocations, the amount of the block grant that they receive is going to be significantly larger. I will tell you that this year is a tough year for the budget because the numbers we gave to the colleges for their the amount of block grant that they should get is actually quite a bit lower because we relied on the governor's budget proposal. And as you recall, the governor did not include about $20 million of fringe benefit assistance that has been in effect for a while. So that $20 million cut shows up in the block grant that each college was preliminarily advised they would receive. I firmly believe, based on action by the Appropriations Committee, that money will be restored through their, well, it's a little different. They're calling it unfunded liability support for the colleges. But because it's still very much, there's such disagreement between the governor's proposal and the legislative proposal on that issue, we thought it was most conservative to go with the lower number, and we'll revise up. By the time you receive the budget, unless something happens and the legislature doesn't finish its work on time, we will be able to amend that to reflect the final action by the state that will improve the condition and the block grant available to each campus quite considerably, like I said, by about $20 million. So that's all I have on that particular item, but I'm happy to take any questions.
David.
I have a reputation to maintain. Thanks a lot. It's quite interesting. I added up the number of employees that you mentioned who will be providing the services in FY22, and that's 369. Do you know how many of those are currently employees at the system office? And I assume you're including all of the IT staff, or exclusive of those who might be providing some residual service to the universities? Do you know?
I do, but I would like to put that in order because we have gone through and identified for each of those 369 employees whether they were, where they were last year. Essentially, were they at the system office? Were they at the amount of I will say that all of the IT staff were system office. The HR were all system office, but 2 years ago they were from someplace else, or they're new. Payroll, everybody was from a campus. Accounting, everyone was from a system office, except one person. And everybody in purchasing was from a campus. So the EMSA is a mixed bag, and I don't want to give you the numbers, so I'd like to just double check those, and I'd be happy to share that information with you. I will tell you that of the EMSA employees, the vast majority of them came from campuses. Of the 204 employees in the EMSA program and in enrollment management, the vast majority from campuses, but a couple dozen, but I'll get you the specific numbers, were either from the system office or are vacant positions that they anticipate filling. There are a very limited number of vacant positions included, but I will get you a tally of how those positions break down by campus, system office, or vacant.
Yeah, because I think on the quantitative aspect, your report is extremely helpful. What the concerns that are had expressed to me by community college faculty are the qualitative aspects. That is to say, how is the quality of service that was previously provided at the college going to be assured when it is now 1 or 2 or even 3 steps away at the system office, depending on how whether they have to go through the regional presidents and then through the college president and then through the CSU president or not?
We are, obviously that is a significant concern, maintaining the quality as we make this transition and find better ways of doing things. So we hope that we will be able to improve some of the quality as we go forward in some important areas. But so there are a couple of ways that we're dealing with that. First, I don't think that we are requiring that this sort of go through a hierarchy and in order to deal with a problem with your paycheck, or you want to change your your deduction information, or any of the things that you might do on payroll as an example. We're creating and we have created, although we're trying to do a better job of publicizing it, information about how to contact your payroll person, and that's I mean, I think there's some folks who are upset because they used to go down the hall to talk to their payroll person. To be honest, nobody's gone down their hall to talk to their payroll person for at least 14 months because the payroll people have all been working in remote locations for 14 months. So that's, and that would have been true whether we did shared services or not. So that's, as we come back from remote work, I think we'll have a better sense of how, whether or not some of those changes are simply frustration at the diaspora of employees that we currently have, or whether those are real changes in our the customer service. But I know that the management of the shared service in payroll and HR and purchasing have been very focused on trying to address some of the customer service requirements that they have. We have for the finance shared services a whole set of escalation approaches and a committee with representation from the universities and colleges that reviews our actions. And we're working now to ensure, one of the areas that we're trying to focus on is data provision, that we want to make sure that the shared services are providing timely and appropriate management information to the campuses about issues that they care about. We're working to address the sort of contact for problem resolutions. In the HR area, they're working to ensure that they are meeting the timely needs of management at all the campuses for their HR needs. I know in HR, for instance, it comes, we're doing this right at the time when there's this surge of people retiring, so that the great number of our staff in HR have had to dedicate themselves to counseling existing employees about their retirement options and processing their retirement paperwork. So we're working through all of those concerns and addressing the quality of service issues. I certainly share your concern, and we are not. And that was one of the reasons that we elected not to do any sort of changing in who the staff was, who the staff are, who deal with the issues. So while in payroll, there's been a little bit of sort of organization, largely because we had some big gaps, some people who left, and we needed to fill those. So for instance, Gateway Community College, the person who did payroll retired. And so we had to pick up that with staff who had, so now that work is being completed by staff who previously done payroll at other campuses. That's created a little bit of a challenge because the Gateway staff don't know this person and didn't know how to reach them. But we're working through that to make sure that they know who it is. Obviously, when their payroll person retired at the beginning of the pandemic, they were going to get somebody new to do that work, and nobody would know them because they're working remotely. This is a problem that is not necessarily a function of shared services, but just of the significant turnover we've had in that area. So I'm very attuned to it, and we are absolutely working on the quality of the work that we perform. And the reporting on those outcomes, and I expect to see significant improvement in that area certainly over this year, but even going forward. I think we are doing our best to establish a culture of continuous improvement and maintaining quality and improving quality all the time. So. We've already made some improvements in payroll. For instance, we changed the way that campuses input the hours for adjuncts, which ultimately is going to significantly reduce the amount of time and effort and the likelihood of human error in the processing of adjunct payroll, which is always been a complicated and challenging part of our payroll operation.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you very much. Any other questions at all, the members? Yes, please. Go ahead, Julie.
Joanne, you're muted.
Take your mute off, Joanne.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh dear. See, Rich, you're not alone. I would just like to make a comment. Ben, I continue to be grateful to you for the unbelievable information you're sharing with us and for the efforts that you and your staff have put into this unbelievable change, which can be challenging for everyone. And thank you. You have explained it beautifully. I love your chart. It's going to really help everyone understand better going forward. And it just gives me a lot hope and optimism that all of this is going to work. So Ben, thank you. You are amazing.
Joanne, my day is better for your comments.
Well said, Joanne. The only comment about your charts, but I'd use some other colors too. I like a lot of color in there.
You will get a colorful budget in a month, I assure you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for your comments, David, also, by the way. You're always informative, the response that we get from Ben. Anybody else on that subject? Thanks again, Ben, and thank you for the comments. The last information item we have is refunding results, which of course is always of interest. Ben, would you want to just delve into that?
Yes. We undertook a refunding that closed a week ago, although the results were known when it was priced several weeks before that. This was a two-part refunding. We refunded about $14 million on a taxable basis, so these were already callable. Typically, municipal bonds or public bonds you can't refund them on a tax-exempt basis until they're callable, which is about typically 10 years for our bonds. So we refunded about 10 years, $14 million worth of 10-year-old or older bonds. And we refunded about $85 million on a taxable basis. So these are what's called an refunding. And we have to not only borrow the money on a taxable basis, but then use those proceeds, invest those proceeds in securities that are timed to mature at the same time that the individual bonds become callable. Both of those were very successful in my view. The total interest cost is around 2%. I had an opportunity to review all the other financial transactions in higher education during that week, or not all, but all that were provided, maybe all, certainly most. And we performed relative to what they call the MMD benchmark favorably. I think we were among the three issues with the lowest spread for our rating, which is AA. We were helped by the state's bond rating improving. They were upgraded by Moody's a week before we sold the bonds, which was fantastic news and something that we got the benefit of. So we are still awaiting. It's a relatively complicated process once these bonds are redone to allocate the costs to individual projects and the costs that are borne by each of the universities. In general, until that's done, I won't have the specific debt service implications for each individual university, but we are reducing the debt service cost to the Connecticut State Universities by about $1 million in aggregate next year. That number goes down a little bit and will be about $600,000 or $700,000 a year in debt service savings for the remaining 20 years life of the refunding bonds. I think it was a very successful move. I will tell you that there's always a little bit of anxiety about doing an advance refunding because of the possibility that if you waited and were able to do it on a tax-exempt basis in the future, you could save even more. But because we felt that the interest rate environment was so low, and because there is significant concern that the amount of public spending that is envisioned by the White House over the next few years and has been enacted through the stimulus funds that have been passed by Congress, that those may have an effect of increasing debt service costs. for public borrowing overall over the next several years, we felt that it was a good time for us to lock in some savings, and we did that. It is, I will tell you that as a result of the work involved in doing the bond issue, we had to fully review and update our projections of debt service costs relative to the university fee that funds them and the revenue from dormitories and dining halls. And even using the poor numbers from the current pandemic impacted year, we have a very stable and solid debt program. The coverage of our debt service rapidly rises over the coming years, and we are paying down our debt quickly, and we have plenty of resources to pay that debt. I'm not arguing that we should incur more right now, but we clearly have a debt program that in the future, if the board thinks it's advisable, could sustain additional debt to support facilities at the universities if that's necessary. So I think it's very happy news. We're saving some money, and we are solidifying the condition of our debt program so that it is available to us to support improvements in the future.
Thank you, Ben. Comments? So so we're at 2% now, as opposed, because of our new bond rating with the like Moody's, as opposed to 2.5 or 3 or whatever.
We were on the tax exempt. We ended up being 53 basis points above MMD, which is the sort of the hypothetical rate for a perfect AAA credit in the municipal bond market. So that's, I think, extraordinarily. I mean, to be honest, when I was at OPM, we were routinely borrowing at 150 or 200 basis points above MMD because of not only was our credit rating poorer at that time, but because the markets react to all the other news about the economics and finances of any government when they price these. So I think this reflects strong support for the state government. Our rating is supported by what they call the Special Capital Reserve Fund, the SCARF, which is a credit in which we go to market with the state's bond rating. So the state is in relatively solid shape. They have balanced their budget and are dealing with some of the longer term issues and have been consistently over a period of time, and we were rewarded for that. So yes, it would have been about 2.5, I think, probably, if we had been trading at the area that we would have been a year or two ago.
That's great. Thank you. Did you have a question, Joanne? Joanne, would you unmute?
You're muted.
Unmute
I'm sorry, I was interrupted by an issue here at the office, and I was talking to someone else. So please excuse me and my rudeness and not paying a complete attention to you for the last 3 or 4 minutes.
It went unnoticed, Joanne, I promise.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments? If not, then we'll move to the action items, and we have 2 action items on today's agenda. One deals with, both of them should be relatively easy. I preempt the comments with that. The graduate intern change in policy at the CSUs. Ben, do you want to just go over that quickly, and we'll go over the resolution after that, please?
Sure. Central Connecticut State University has asked us, and they have the concurrence of their colleagues at the other universities, to ask for a 2-year exemption to the limit on the number of graduate interns. This is a program that a longstanding board policy limits it to 1 graduate intern for every 500 enrolled students. And because of the somewhat sudden drop, particularly at Central, in enrollment in the 2021 school year, that impacts the calculation for how many graduate internships they can offer next year. And this would, the data, the enrollment from last year would result in them dropping to, I believe, 18 graduate interns, and they have a program that they believe is should be operated a little above 20, and so they've asked us for an exception to the policy for the next 2 years, so they can maintain their program. I believe their intention is to hire 22 graduate interns next year. If there are any questions about that, Professor Robinson from Central is available here, who is familiar with the program at Central, which was the impetus for this request.
Any other comments? I think it's a great idea. I think people such as you, David, in your department, I'm sure somewhere around you have graduate assistants, and they're very helpful. And we, and discussing it with Ben, didn't want to see that diminish or lose those that are there, or possibly those that are in the process of completing their 2 years and have them hurt in the process. So we thought this was a good idea. Ben went over it and has set some standards on it, and has I think, an amendment to the resolution, which will help. But other than that, it's a very positive thing, I think, for our students and an incentive for others that are coming to our universities. Any other comments?
I'm just it's Ari, Richard. Just
Yeah.
I guess what are we solving here? So it's to expand the cap of the graduate intern program.
Yeah, basically what's happened is you get one intern for every 500 students. And due to the diminishing number of students over the last year or so, that would lower the number of allowable interns. So what we're going to do is suspend that and let it go back to roughly, I think, in the amendment, we're going to say, what, 25 men?
Yes.
Which would more than cover schools like Central, who are requesting 22 of them this year, so that those students would be able to be active, get their funding and their exemptions for fees, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. I'm not yeah. So what we're saying is we're looking to go past the limit on the ratio, which would then result in additional monies being spent. I'm just trying to understand what the implication is.
No, we're not trying to, go ahead. I was going to say, no, we're not trying to go beyond. What we're trying to do is at least maintain where they were before, so nobody ends up losing their dollars and their exemptions. None of those interns end up losing any dollars along the way, or any exemptions for fees, et cetera, at the universities. And the Central is looking to maybe add 1 or 2 more, which would not be possible if we went by the ratio of 1 to 500 with the diminishing number of students we've had over the last year. And it's only set for 2 years, 22 and 23.
What was the purpose of the limit being set in the first place?
You mean the 1 to 500 ratio?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I wasn't around part of decision making. That may have been before my time, before World War I.
Maybe you could speak to that, Ben.
It was from 2009, so it's been in effect for quite a while. I assume it was put in place simply as a guardrail because these internships entail a tuition waiver. So these are graduate students who are induced to come with free tuition, and I believe they can earn a living working as a graduate assistant and teaching some classes.
Right, they get about $15,000 a year on that.
Right.
And so the sort of the concept seems like it may have been to not be spending too much on a ratio basis against what we were getting paid for. Is that?
I believe that the reason they did a ratio was so that they could adopt a standard that would apply to the 4 universities of different size, so that each one would have a corresponding number of graduate internships available. I don't think, typically though, because these are multi-year commitments that we would like to make to our graduate students, because the graduate
Yeah.
long, I think when the enrollment plummets as it did last year during the pandemic, they are concerned that they will certainly not be able to bring in any new ones and might not be able to renew some of the existing ones if the standard is not relaxed.
Gotcha.
And those,
All right.
and those programs last about 2 years of it.
Got it. All right.
Other comments on this?
Rich, when you're ready, I would be happy to read the amendment that you asked me to prepare.
Okay, I think everybody has the resolution before them, and it kind of goes to Ari's comments a few minutes ago. Why don't you go ahead and do the amendment to that resolution and resolve?
Okay, the amendment is that the resolve be amended to read.
Ben, can you share that, please, so our YouTube viewers can see it as well, please?
I certainly can. Just bear with me one moment so that I bring it up on my screen. I thought I had it open, but I did not somehow.
Hey, Ben, I think it's page 12 of the agenda packet.
No, I was going to bring up just the
amendment.
The amendment. So, yes, I will try to make that a little more readable, and I will share my screen. My email to Rich, in which I gave the language, which says that the amendment in its former language would read, resolved that for the 21 and 22 and 22-23 academic years, the limitation on the number of graduate interns be set at 25 per university while enrollment recovers from the pandemic. So it would essentially lift the ratio and establish a hard number of 25, which you can see from my note to Rich, would accommodate Central's plans as well as the other universities who I think have fewer than 25, or well, certainly will have fewer than 25, have fewer than 22 in the coming year.
Comments on the resolution, on the amendment to the resolution? I would move that resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any other further discussion on it? All those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution's passed. Now for adoption of the amended resolution. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. The resolution's adopted. Thank you, Ben. And the second one deals with Manchester and their easement. Do you want to just briefly hit that one, please?
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask my colleague, Keith Epstein, to present that.
Is Keith on?
Keith's right here.
Keith.
I'm here. Hi, everybody. So there's in front of you, there's a request to approve an easement at Manchester Community College for Eversource as an underground electric feeder. I provided a map in your package to help spell out a little better what goes together, the exact configuration of the site. And you could see in the back northeast corner of Manchester Community College, Ramey Road is the rear entrance to the campus. Alongside Ramey Road, there is a bike path and a green grassed area as far as a snow shelf or a little shoulder along the road. Ramey Road runs into Bidwell Street, which is a town road, and adjacent to both Bidwell and Manchester Community College is Interstate 384. And within this configuration of property, there is an existing utility easement across Bidwell Street. And there's also an existing utility easement of about 250 feet wide running across Manchester Community College. And you can see on the little display I gave you the little boxed out area highlighted yellow. It's about 20 feet wide and 130 feet long, running adjacent to Ramey Road. That is the requested easement location. It starts at the public utility easement on Bidwell Street and ends at the existing utility easement on Manchester Community College. And there's a little dotted line on the map too. And Eversource is proposing again an underground electric feeder to add one. The dotted line on the existing easement shows its location, and of course that would run into the new easement. The Eversource would like to maintain a most direct path for the electric conduit or the electric feeder, and they're asking for the 130-foot, 20-foot wide easement to give them a more direct route. If they follow the current easement onto our site and onto the 384 site, it's a heavily wooded area and not an easy route to take as far as an electric feeder. I'm asking that the committee approve and authorize an easement on the site. Any improvements made, any modifications made in construction of the easement. And again, everything's underground, so nothing will be visible when complete. Any disruptions now or in the future by Eversource by way of the easement will be required to be restored to its original shape by Eversource. There's no cost for the easement. We haven't had financial agreements with Eversource in the past or the public utility for easements, and it's I think a viable request. We have no future use for this land other than a bike path. If you have any questions, I could answer it.
No, Keith, we did one for them. I said that to Ben the other day. We were chatting about this. Didn't we do one for them a few years back in Manchester? Or was it Western? I'm trying to think. We just did an easement.
We did one in Manchester, as a matter of fact, on the other side of the campus. That was with the town. The town widened the road, and we had a small reconfiguration. That's what that was. We have done a electric and a natural gas easement across Western's campus in the past for the public utility.
And therefore, it kind of begs the question I was going to ask, that all insurances and responsibilities and so on are going to be the responsibility of Eversource, and we would have, we'd be held harmless for anything.
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
Good. Other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. The resolution is adopted. Any other comments before we adjourn? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your courtesy. Here.
Thank you.